Hello, everybody. This is Laren with the Fantasy Grounds Academy. We're going to take a look at the Fantasy Grounds edition of the Level Up Advanced 5th edition rule set. This is put out by EN Publishing. This is from their very successful Kickstarter that happened last fall. I didn't get involved with that, unfortunately, but I was interested. I had my eye on it, and I'm going to show the content today. So if you were not wondering what this was about, basically they've taken the rule set for 5th edition and kind of bumped it up a little bit. They've added a bunch of new rules, mechanics, try to get more role-playing and exploration involved. So this is a pretty cool stab at that. I think that a majority of the community is a little bit maybe burned out, or maybe they're wanting more. So this would definitely give you the extra oomph that you might want out of a role-playing game. I think most of us have been waiting for something a little bit more crunchy, I guess, and a little bit more detail to it. So this definitely fills that niche. So if you're someone who wants a little bit more than just the standard fare, what you get with the standard 5th edition rule set, definitely check this out. So this was the Kickstarter that launched, and it was very successful. And going to the next page here, this is the actual website. So you have levelupadvanced.com. So this here, you can look for resources. You have FAQs. I mean, there's all kinds of things in here that you can use. There's a A5e tools here that's going to be available for the Kickstarters. And there's links to buy and everything else. So you can look at all the latest news. There's some artwork here. Pretty nicely done. I have to say, Morrus, you've done a good job. And finally, they have released the Fantasy Grounds version last night. I did do a little bit of homework and research on this before I did the show, because I've never created a character with this rule set. So I went ahead and gave it a little try. And it wasn't too bad. And if you use the Fantasy Grounds version, there is an extension that you'll need to load up, because it does change the character sheet a little bit, and there's some extra rules and such that are added. So if you are going to check the rule set out and you just purchased it, make sure you load the extension and then load the rule set. So we'll get into that in a little bit. But yeah, so there's a lot of really cool stuff that's available for Fantasy Grounds. They only have the Menagerie and the Player's Handbook, basically the adventure guide up. But eventually, I believe they'll put in the other content. So there's other books that are available. If you check out the website, there's some adventures. There's the Trials and Treasures, which would be nice to have, and also the mythological figures and maleficent monsters. So there's other things that could potentially be put into that particular genre, but I think for now we just have the Adventures Guide and we have the Monsters Menagerie, which is a really good start. So the other thing is, I did a little research looking around. I wanted to make sure I kind of had an idea what I was up against. So what I did is I went on to the forums in the community area, and I found Morrus's guide, which he put out last summer. And this is actually pretty nice. It takes you through character creation. It gives you an idea of how that process goes. So I took this information and I put it into Fantasy Grounds. Even though there is a reference manual in Fantasy Grounds, I kind of like this one because, one, I can read it easier. The other is because I like the way this is laid out. So I kind of laid it out similarly in Fantasy Grounds for myself. So when I do the character creation, it won't be so difficult for me to wrap my mind around. The next step here is to take a look at the different screens here. So there's a lot of artwork included. They didn't skimp out on that. This is some previews that they generated so that people can see what the content looks like, and we'll look at a little bit of that in Fantasy Grounds. So this is the walkthrough that I was just talking about that I'm going to go through in Fantasy Grounds so that we can take a look and see how to build this character. So this is going to be based off of Morrus's character creation walkthrough. I didn't have a token made up, so I kind of cheated and I went on to Roll Advantage token stamp, and I made a little token for this bard who's a white, based on a white dragon. It's a dragonborn bard. So I went ahead and created that. So this is the Fantasy Grounds version of it. And you can see I got the character sheet. It's blank. I haven't started that yet. in the modules area, I updated Fantasy Grounds after I purchased it. Brings in this content. So here's the menagerie, and then here's the actual adventures guide. If you can see in this list over here, you have the reference manual. So when you click on the reference manual, it will pop up where you have the actual rules, just like you were if you had the PDF or the hardback book. So if you go through here, there's a character creation tutorial. It's pretty thorough. It's not very bad, but this one's called Building Varia, which is probably the next one I'll do, but I'm going to use actually Morrus's guide because I really like the way that one played out. This one's got more artwork and it's laid out a lot more professionally, but I kind of liked his version better. And I did actually build something similar to this last night, but I had some confusion over some of the different mechanics and such. So if you're new to Fantasy Grounds or D&D, I don't know if I'd recommend this for you right away unless this is exactly what you're starting with, because it is a little different and there's some rules that are a little bit above and beyond your standard, but for the most part, it shouldn't be too hard. All right, so the next step is to bring up the character sheet, which we have already. This is based off of Earthic. Earthic is a bard dragonborn based off a white dragon. So I'm going to close the reference manual for now, but as you can see, I have it bookmarked down here on the hotkeys. So in case I need to bring that back up, then I'll have it available. So I'll go ahead and click on this page, and then I'll just close it. I have my own story entry that I made from the website, the one I showed you earlier. And this is actually Morrus's guide. So I'm going to use this one. I actually like this one a lot better than what's in the actual the character creation guide. So what we have here is also, I put a link in here that goes straight to the guide in case I get lost. But it's a step-by-step walkthrough. It kind of guides you through the process of creating your first level up character. So they're slightly different than D&D, not much. Pretty much if you're familiar with 5th edition, you'll get a majority of this. So there's 6 major steps. You have ability scores, which is generally the best practice in Fantasy Grounds to do your ability scores first. Then you're going to work on your heritage, which is kind of like your base race, and then you'll have an actual culture on top of that. And then your background, destiny, and class. So those are the build order that they suggest. Earthic is a dragonborn, a white dragon, and throughout this process, there's examples of what they are going to provide for this particular character. I'm going to try to follow those as best I can. There are some little minor nuances that are different in Fantasy Grounds than traditional pen and paper, but I think you'll be pleasantly surprised as to what those are. So without further ado, I'm going to go in and start checking this out. So we're going to roll or select the ability score. So it's very similar to the DnD5e rule set. In this case, you have variants. You can do a standard array, which is what this one recommends that we do. So the ability scores will be modified by your choice of your background later. So as you're building, the standard array is going to give them a certain set of numbers, but as you create, it's going to stack up and create more modifications. So there's a table down here that shows what the modifications are. So I'm going to plug these values in, but if you were going to do it the way they say, you can do the 4d6 and you can drop the lowest. So it says the ability scores are generated randomly by rolling six-sided dice and recording the total of the highest 3 on a spare sheet of paper. So you can continue to do this until you have a total of 6 numbers. So in Fantasy Grounds, you technically can take a 6-sided, right-click, 6 times, and then drop that into the hotkeys. And that would be kind of like your the way that you can generate scores, like a dice pool. So you can click on that 6 times and come up with your 6 stats if you wanted to. And that's pretty good rolls. But see, this is the way this is just going to generate numbers to count. So that wouldn't work because it's adding the numbers. So if you want to really do the actual 4d6 drop the lowest, there is a dice command. So you do right/dice and then 4d6, which is your dice that you're going to use, and then K3. So that's a little formula. Once you have that typed in, you can drag and drop that. So I'm going to replace the other dice pool that I made, and I'm going to use that instead. And what that'll do is it will take and it will give you the roles that you want. So you do is /dice 4d6 and then K3, which is to keep the lowest. So when you hit enter or when you do that, it will take and give you the rolls that you need. But in this case, we're going to use what they suggest here. So this would be the standard array. So if you're going to plug in your 12 for strength and 14 for dex, looks like 13 for con, and mind you, this is a bard, so they've chose these for certain reasons. And then there's 8 for the wisdom and 15 for charisma. So that kind of makes sense. So you have those as your starting ability scores. So that's what they recommended for this build, just so we can go through the tutorial. And like I said, there's modifiers here, so if you're unsure what the ranges are, that's what they are. And now it's asking us to choose a heritage. So if you're familiar with Fantasy Grounds, if you drop down the actual character button here, you'll notice a few different things. You have cultures, you have destinies, heritages, things like that. So heritages are going to be what I'm going to drag and drop over onto this particular area. So you record your traits, which include things like your size, your speed, and any special abilities, like in this case, the Dragonborn's his breath weapon. So if I click on heritages, there is the Dragonborn. So I'll just drag and drop that onto the character sheet. And then it asks me for a gift. So if you look here, it tells you choose a heritage gift. Each heritage contains 2 or more gifts which help distinguish you from others that have the same heritage. So a Dragonborn character can choose Draconian armor, Draconian fins, or Draconian wings. So we're going to choose the Draconian armor for this particular build according to this this tutorial. So we're going to click on that and then click the OK button. And as you're doing this, this is actually putting this stuff on your character sheet. So if you go to your abilities tab, it's already starting to add these features automatically. So anything that comes in with your class or your background and such will be added automatically. So you don't have to write anything down. The next step is culture. So what you're going to do with culture is drag and drop it over on top of the heritage. So it's kind of like dragging 2 races. So basically you're going to pick a Dragonborn, but then you're also going to pick your culture, which kind of adds to your racial modifiers and such. So you'll have cultural traits. So we're going to open up the cultures. And in this cultures area, according to our tutorial, we're going to have the Steamforged culture, which is basically representative of a character who grew up in a kind of an early industrial society. So Steamforged character will gain traits like mind like steel, trap, tech savvy, war scholar, and some languages. So we're going to drag and drop that over to this area. So it's called Steamforged. So just drag and drop it right on top of where it says heritage. And that actually adds like a sub-race, so to speak, but it's called a heritage. So what that does is it just adds more content on top of what you already have. And any of your ability scores that would go up would adjust automatically, so you don't have to worry about that. And then if you go to your abilities tab, it's starting to add all these special features as you go. So we have common, we have a language choice here, and then some of the features that were added from your culture. So this is the nice thing about Fantasy Grounds is it kind of does a lot of that for you. You don't really have to write it down. So next we're going to pick backgrounds. So if I close the cultures and open up the backgrounds, this will give me a list of backgrounds that are available for this particular setting. I don't have any other content open. I had the SRD open when I checked it last night. It's not necessary. This rule set is pretty much self-contained. So you don't need a lot of extra content if you just get the books that come with the particular setting. So the next step is to pick a background. So in this particular one, there's about 20 different ones. It says maybe you were a farmer or maybe a guard. So what you're going to do is take a look at your background traits. You'll record those, if any. These will include 2 ability score increases and proficiencies in some skills and tools, along with a special feature. So Earthic, in this case, is going to be a farmer who gains a bonus to wisdom and 1 other ability score, which in this case, they're going to pick charisma because he's a bard. So I'm going to grab farmer, and I'm going to drag and drop it onto the backgrounds area. So if I take that and drag and drop that over, it's going to pop up. And in this case, we're going to pick charisma because it already gave us 1 ability score increase, and that was in wisdom. But now we're going to pick the secondary choice one, which in this case is charisma. So I'm going to hit OK. And then I get to pick 1 additional skill, which is going to add to my pool of skills here. So right now I just have nature. So let's see what else we're going to have. But that probably came from the animal handling. So in this case, a farmer gains wisdom, and it also gains nature or animal handling or survival skills and proficiency in the use of land vehicles, plus the ability to carry twice the usual number of supplies. So that's kind of like bulk. So I think what we'll do is we're going to pick whatever one makes more sense. So Ulrich is going to be rolled, and he's basically going to probably pick animal handling because that looks like something he would probably choose. Let me see what it says. So there's, okay, record all your traits. Earthic farmer, yep, he has that. So it's proficiency in nature and animal handling or survival skills. And okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pick animal handling. And then I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And that adds that automatically to the skills area. So we have animal handling and nature for the time being. So now that you have that, you have your background and those sort of things. So what it's telling me now is it should be 12, 14, 13, 10, 9, and 16. So we made the right choices so far. So background connections and mementos. So you're going to roll or choose 1 connection and 1 memento from the list in your chosen background. These will help flesh out your backstory. So these are similar to the D&D one, but they're different. So if you open up your background on the character sheet, stretch this out, you'll notice that there are some different things here. There's equipment, there's the bit and brittle thing that you get, there's the farmer connection, and the memento. So what we're going to do is it's going to say roll or choose one of them. So in this case, Earthic will roll, and his connection is the landowner who foreclosed on their family land, and their memento is a half of a locket given to them by a missing sweetheart. So these are tables that you can pull up and roll on. I'm going to actually drag and drop them because I'm going to pick the examples that are actually given in the tutorial. So I'm going to go to the Notes tab. This is where your background is. And here's your connections. So I'm just going to drag and drop the text. Or if you wanted to, you can roll, and you can actually drag the text from the chat window to the character sheet. But in this case, I'm going to go straight off the table. So this is my connection. And then as far as the mementos go, I'm going to pull that up. And the mementos are basically another part of your backstory. And this is the one where you have a locket. So I'm going to take a look at this, and it says, yeah, so half of a locket given to you by a missing sweetheart. So I'm going to go ahead and drag and drop that over there too. So these are just choices that I picked based off of this tutorial, but obviously you can roll just like the other one. In this case, it rolled a 7, so it could be a corncob pipe that you have. So this is just a part of your backstory. So once you've done that, you got your background connections and your mementos. Now we're going to choose a destiny. So I'm going to close the background and go to the side here under destinies. And these are destinies that you can choose from, and you would basically open these up and read what they say in there. So in this case, the final part of this character's origin is their destiny. This tells what motivates and inspires your character. Destinies include things like knowledge, revenge, wealth. In this case, we're going to choose the revenge destiny as it ties in nicely with our farmer background connection. The landowner who foreclosed on our Dragonborn character's family land. So it's going to be based off of that previous content. So I'm going to go ahead and take the, let's see, he wanted us to pick the go with, so this is the destiny. Let's go with, let's see, this tells destiny's okay. Earthic is going to choose the revenge. So I'm going to drag and drop that on here. So revenge, and there's a table for the revenge destiny. So when you have this, you can drag and drop this revenge destiny. So if you go through here and look at this table, it's going to give you the motivation for it too. So I'll drag and drop the revenge on the destiny part. And then we're going to take motivation and roll on the table and see what it comes up with. So you can roll on here. And in this case, I rolled lost a loved one. You kill the monster that stole them away from you. That could be something. But in this case, the example says that in this case, it's a D20. And when you roll on there, Earthic is going to, with the served cold source of inspiration. So served cold, let's see what that is going to give us. So there's dishonored, there's a loved one lost, ravaged home, restoration, dishonored, oppressed. So there's lots of different things, but this is under the revenge part. So that makes sense. So you record your destiny source of inspiration. This tells you when you will gain an inspiration die. And then for the motivation, we'll have to add that on here. So characters with the revenge destiny have the serve cold source of inspiration. They gain an inspiration die when they successfully attack a surprised opponent or lead a foe into a prepared trap, amongst other things. So this is some of the actual features that you're going to be getting with this, and this is the served cold is one of these. Let's see, source. Yeah, serve cold. You draw inspiration from the wails of those who have wronged you. You gain inspiration whenever you outwit them. So basically, that's a way to do it. So that is what this one's going to choose. So the motivation might be something that you would want to look at. So let's see. When we rolled the destiny, the motivation, and here's the inspiration feature, so you can record your inspiration feature. It's a special ability. So Earthic, basically for the inspiration feature, the destiny is in the ability called Cloak and Dagger, which allows the character to avert suspicious danger when it closes in. The fulfillment feature is basically when it's time to fulfill your destiny, like after a long journey, maybe after your character gets much more advanced. You'll get special benefits if you fulfill the feature. It's kind of like a long-term goal. So Earthic's revenge fulfillment is called retaliatory reputation, and it's achieved when you have been killed, imprisoned, or dethroned whatever entity wronged you. And it gives you ability to frighten others with a threatening stare. So that's kind of interesting. That's kind of the long play instead of the short goals, which is really cool. And then, of course, you have motivation. So you finally would roll on that table, and you would choose one of the 6 motivations listed for your destiny or create your own. Along with your background, connections, and mementos, this motivation helps to flesh out your character. So I think we're going to, I guess we'll do restoration would be a good one. We can pick our own there if we wanted to. Just depends on how you want to do it. But it looks like they give us a chance to pick our own in that case. So I'm going to go with restoration. So that would be drag and dropped into the motivation area. And again, in the revenge thing, you'll see this revenge destiny, and that's what this is. And then your inspiration feature, Cloak and Dagger, is added back here on your abilities tab. And this is another feature that you get for your destiny feature. So there's a lot of different things going on here that are different, but it's a feature basically that you can add. And if you wanted to, you could drag and drop it there so that you have an idea of what it is and you can look it up. You don't have to keep digging through the manual. And then there's the retaliatory. If you fulfill your your destiny, that would also come up. So this would be up here, and just drag and drop that into your features. So there you go. So there's your character build for your background, your stats, and now we're going to do the class. So the class is actually going to be part of this bard build. So if we go to the first tab, we bring up the class and level, or you can just drag it on to class and level. It's up to you. So I'm going to go to classes and then pick one. So in this case, it's going to be the bard. So I'll just drag and drop this onto the character sheet. And when I do that, it's going to give me 3 skills to pick from. So when we do that, it's going to give us level 1. It tells us about the hit points and the hit dies and such. The proficiency bonus is built into it, kind of like the regular 5th edition. And then there are some other things that we're going to look at. But the final steps are defense, save, difficulty classes, your offense. There are some other things that you got to look at before you move on with getting your character built. But when you get this, we're going to go ahead and choose 3 of these. I think I'm going to pick just some of my own. I'm not going to necessarily pick this for anything specifically, but you can choose what you want. But it says here that some of your proficiencies might be from your culture, your background, those sort of things. So I'm going to go ahead and look at what we have here. So I'm going to definitely probably pick engineering because he's a kind of a tech. That would be one. I might do history. And then let me make sure I don't double up. So if you want to look at your abilities and your skills. So I have animal handling and nature so far. So I think I'm going to get basically the engineering, the history, and perhaps the animal handling. I already have animal handling. Let's go with nature or survival. There we go. So these are just things that you can pick as you go. So you just really no specific thing, but you get any 3 and then any 3 skills and your 2 mystical instruments, and you get dex and charisma saving throw bonuses, any 3 skills, and several weapons. So that is part of your build. So once I've done that, I'll go ahead and hit the OK, and that adds it to here. So you have all this stuff here. And then it goes into your spells, knacks, and other tricks. So most classes also gain other features, which are selected from lists. So when you have this character, you get characters with spellcasting ability. You're going to be able to choose 1 or more first-level spells and a number of cantrips. The entry tells you how many spells to choose. So when you pick the table from the class itself, it will tell you. So if you pull up Bard and you click on the actual class, which is going to be in the class and level area, you get to choose what you want to pick out of here. And it's based off of the table here. So at first level, you get this arts, specialty, bardic inspiration, battle hymn, and spell casting. So if you come over here, you should see battle hymn, bardic inspiration. So that's already been added to here, so it's pretty cool. And then here are some of your draconic traits. And then here are some other things that you get. So you got to read through these to see how you're going to adjust your character. So I'll leave this chart up here, but looks like we get 2 cantrips, 4 spells known total, and we can prepare up to 2 spells. So we're going to pick some spells probably later if we get time. But I think for now, I'm going to go through these special abilities and make sure that we have those. So I'm going to close the little cheat sheet up. I'm going to move this over. I'm going to go through this and make sure we got everything. So here we got +1 to wisdom. I already know we dealt with that. Your art specialty is basically you get to pick instruments. So it looks like no bard is complete without their instrument. So be it a flute, a lute, or even your own voice. So starting at first level, you learn how to make art your greatest weapon for influencing the battlefield. For the purpose of spellcasting, any musical instrument that you have training in counts as your spell focus. Also, although spells can be cast without these instruments, only targets that are able to perceive your performance can benefit from this feature. Whenever you finish a short or long rest, choose one of the following to be your art specialty. So this is when you will probably need to design some kind of custom type skill check or some kind of roll that you can make. So in this case, I would probably take and make a bard feature area. So I'm going to edit the list on the bottom right corner. And in that case, I'm going to go to the actions tab because I'm going to add these in as actions just in case. So you get to pick one of these, but you cannot choose to do them all at once. You have to pick one. So all spells can be cast with, okay, so it says whenever you finish a short rest, you can choose one of the following to be your art specialty. So these are the things that you can do for wind instruments, your voice, visual stuff like dancing, light manipulation, shapes. You have string instruments, and you have percussion. So these are things you might want to add as a specialty area. So I'm going to click on the add powers, and this one would be the art specialty. So I will call that, this section will be art specialty, but it's under the bard features. So, and then once I've done that, I'm going to create probably 4 of these, or create one power for each one of these, just so I can keep track of these as we're doing this. So there might be 4 more of these coming. So I might want to create more of these. So I might just add all these in and then just call it percussion. So this is where the you can add this automation in, or you can just handle it through the game itself. Like your DM might just wing it and just let you do these things. But it's nice to have these on your character sheet so you remember. And the other thing is, in case there's any automation that you might want to take advantage of down the road, you might find a way to do that. So I'm not going to go through all of that automation because it's different for every character. Some of this stuff it might be a little bit much for newer users, but nonetheless, you can add stuff to your sheet and customize it. That's one of the nice things about Fantasy Grounds is you can add automation, or you can just play it by ear. You don't have to have all this stuff on here, but this is helpful for your game master and for speeding up gameplay when you're on the table. So these are the different things that you might use. And you can only use it once per rest, it looks like. So when you finish a short or long rest, you choose one of the following to be your art specialty. So I'm going to go with wind instruments. And what I'm going to do is take and put a usage on there, which is basically a way to keep track of this without having to resort to remembering all that. So those are just, things that you can do. And then each one of these, I could add the description so I don't have to look this up every time. But it's nice to have just the base feature in here. So if you drag and drop this in there, that's going to give you the description. And then I'm just going to bring that over and put that into the same group. So that way it stays with the group and I have all the descriptions here. And then what I can do is go to preparation mode and change this to 1, and then I'll change it to rest. That way you can track how many times you've used that. So when you're in combat and actions, you can actually click on that and it'll disappear that you've already used that feature. These other things are just going to be if there's any coding involved or any sort of automation, I would add those later. And then each one of those I can put a description on if I wanted to. So this is basically the basis of doing the character sheet. Was the first part that I showed you was to basically to build the character up to that point. But there are some other really cool features that I wanted to show you in regards to some of the automation that Fantasy Grounds offers. I'm not going to get into all of it. We won't have time for that. But I definitely want to show you a few things. So like, for instance, your equipment. If you come over to your abilities and you look at some of your stuff here, so like Draconic Armor, for instance, that is something you need to look at. So you have claws, you have resistance, and you have scales. So basically, these are all things that can be coded onto your character sheet. So if you went over back here and you created a basically you add a power. This would be something that you can add. So you would have this draconic power, which is the main heading part of it. And then if I change that to draconic power here, this would allow you to create a space for that. So this way, this would be claws, and then you would add a couple more. So draconic power, and then you'd have anything you'd want to add in here. So in this case, this will be the resistance. In this case, it would be cold. And then the other would be the actual breath weapon. So those are your draconic abilities that you could add technically, or your DM can just do it for you if you want. But basically, these are just things that you could add. So your claws, for instance, you have retractable claws. So you could just roll a d4 and add a modifier and just manually change the character sheet. Or if you wanted to automate it a little bit more, you could add the claws as a melee attack and base it off this information here. So in this case, what we would do is take the draconic armor feature, which is this, and drag and drop it there, and then drag and drop it down here or put it in the same group as the others. So as you can see, the weapon damage has already been parsed, so I don't even have to worry about that. So I can actually close this and actually delete this extra one for the claws. So what we're going to do there is call this one draconic powers, and then we'll call that one claws. It's already set up, so we don't even have to do that one. So that's because the wording was correct. So it's 1d4 plus 1 for the bonus of your strength modifier, and that's what that is. So that's cool. Now the breath weapon, we'll have to set that up as a cast ability, so that when he uses it, if that's the case, if it's a breath weapon, and then you have, in this case, this won't be a breath weapon, it'll be scales. So this will be armor in this case. So the scales is going to give us a modifier which equals 13 plus your dex modifier. So what we could do is you could go to the front of this and then go up to this magnifying glass next to armor class, and you could permanently add that in here. You could put you can make your base 13. You could change that if you wanted to, or you can add the modifier like of +3, because that's going to give you what you need, and then it's going to give you your dex modifier. Or you could change. You can actually make that a power, basically. So you could go to scales over here, and you would add action, add an effect. So you could say draconic scales, and then add the action. So draconic scales, and then it would be AC:3. So that's basically adding that additional 3 to your base, and then it would be targeted to yourself, and it wouldn't expire or anything. You would just activate it. So when you're in the combat tracker, that would actually be something that you would use. So these are just different ways to utilize the fantasy grounds, and once you get the hang of it and get used to it. So basically that's kind of a cool thing that you could do with this. You also get starting equipment. So what's kind of cool about this is, let's see, for this you get armor, you get tools, 2 instruments, one of your choice, or 1 musical instrument and any other tool, simple weapons, that sort of thing. So there is some parcels that are actually in the campaign. So if you go to your parcels, and it tells you that you can use this equipment, basically these are all the equipment sets that are built into the rule set, and all you have to do is drag and drop this, and it'll actually automatically deduct it from your inventory. So I liked how they set this up. So you're starting off with 135 gold. So depending on what kind of gear that you pick, you're able to change or take. So here's the farmer's equipment. That's one of the things that we get from our background. So if you drag and drop that on there, that's going to give you that, and it deducted the amount from here. So you're getting rations, you get a mule, saddlebags, a shovel, and some clothing. So that's just a way to, to make this simpler. And then if you were going to have anything else, you could add that. So you would get whatever this is set up in your background. So let me go to abilities. So let's see, there's the battle hymn. So if you look through all these, you're going to get a bunch of extra things that you need to understand about your character. So that's important to check these out. But here's a feature called Bit and Brittle. So you know how to stow and transport food. You and one animal in your care each can carry additional supplies equal to your proficiency bonus. So that's pretty cool. The Steam Forge is going to basically give you access to different types of traits. So you have Mind Like a Steel Trap, Tech Savvy, War Scholar. I mean, there's so many different avenues that you can go. So that's why what makes this more advanced is these choices and all the little extras. So when you go through and build characters for this setting, you need to read through all of these and see what they're going to give you. So this one is giving you, when you are an ally, can see, when you see an ally, you can see a sleight of hand or stealth check. You can use your reaction to spend your inspiration to undo any consequences of a failed check. So there's a lot of things that you're going to be looking at and keeping in mind. So Tech Savvy and War Scholar are already on here. Here's your Dragon Breath, the one I was trying to do earlier. So this is based on the type of dragon you are. So this Dragon Breath, I would drag and drop that into this Draconic area and then make sure it goes into the correct place. So in this case, Control Copy, Control V, because I'm going to make sure it's in the right area. And then the base DC is 11, but then you need to change what type of damage it is, because right now it doesn't say the type of damage. It just says 2d6, which isn't quite right. So if you open this up, you need to put cold in there. That way it actually has a damage type. So it based it on all this, but it was something that you have to check out. So additionally, you have a 30-foot line or a 15-foot wide cone, depending. So you can put that in the description so you remember the range of it. But it's 2d6 on failed or half on save, and it increases to 3d6 at 4th level. So some of these things level up with you. So it really depends on what you're doing with the characters and such. So that's just a kind of a brief overview of some of the cool things that you can get with this. And then I think he gets one other set. So when we look at this character, this build, we have a farmer, dragon, and a steam forged type setup. So let's see if there's a cool thing for the steam forged. So there's a skirmisher, soldier, spiritual, survivor, tracker, trader, troublemaker. So you just look through your starting equipment, and then you could pick some give you like an instrument. There's a squire set. This depends on what you're doing. So here's like a blessed explorer. Let's see, charlatan's equipment, a criminal, occultist. Let's see if any of these would make sense. So explorer, farmer's equipment, we already got that. So you can kind of see where this is going. So you can basically choose whatever makes sense for your background. So that's just a way that that you can kind of flesh your character out a little quicker once you understand the path you're going to go down. I would recommend doing a little research before you build, kind of get an idea of what kind of choices you have. Because right now I'm kind of stumbling on here because I'm not sure what starting equipment I get for my class, even though I'm a bard. There's no bard kit. So then you have to think, well, is it a charlatan's kit or what is it? So you got to know that sort of thing coming from your background. So if you go into some of your other abilities and some of your other traits, it might tell you, oh, you get to start with this, you get 2 weapons. So there's a lot of different things in here. So here it says you have this is Mind Like a Steel Trap. So you have proficiency in nature, history, or investigation, and you have an expertise die on checks made using the chosen skill. So there's all kinds of stuff in here that that you have to kind of keep in mind and balance. So it is a lot more advanced in how you handle the characters. So that is something you'll have to pay attention to as you get used to this. But the idea is pretty cool. If you go through some of the pictures, like the artwork in here, there's a lot of really nice looking content that I think is going to make this game a lot funner once you get your mind wrapped around it, how it works. So you have yourself a lot of different cool artworks. Like here's an amethyst dragon that's in this actual module. There's the cover, and there's all kinds of cool creatures. Let's see, that's the monster menagerie that we're looking at. So if you look at this, you can take a look at some of these. Like here's a black bear that comes out of there, the adventurer's guide. There's a thing that shows charm monster, like how the spell looks maybe. There's a concentration example. So there's some pretty cool art, even art for different things. Here's the cover. So here's the actual cover, which is really nice. So yeah, so they just build your character up, but just keep in mind that it's a little bit different. They've added a couple skills, like you have engineering, which isn't in your typical D&D setting. You have culture. There is, what's the other one that's different? There's a couple others that might be different in here. But they're nonetheless, those are the ones that stand out. So engineering and the culture are the two that I noticed that are added. So that's why you have to have the extension loaded. Otherwise, those don't show up in there. So the character sheet's modified to pick up those subtle changes. Then you have, let's see, light traveler set. Let's give them that. So yeah, here's a light traveler set. You can probably use something like that. So when you do that, when you use the parcels, if I go over to his inventory, I can drag and drop this on there, and it will take off the gold that he started with. And you're going to get a quarterstaff. You get an explorer's pack. So there's different things in here that are pretty cool. So that's just a way to flesh the character out and also give it a lot more detail based on the rule set. So it's kind of interesting how this rolls out. But there's your backstory that's pretty important in this rule set, along with the revenge part when it gets into fulfilling your revenge, your inspiration, your fulfillment feature. So these are just different things that will help you along the way when you're role playing. And there again, I think you don't really have to have all this stuff automated, but if you want to make it smoother, it would help if you had some of the stuff coded. Like the breath weapon would be handy, which it already sort of is after I drug it over there. So it kind of gave me the basis of it, but I still have to go in and edit it. So those are just things that you have to get used to as you go through and get used to this rule set. It's a little bit beefier in the role-playing exploration, and there's a lot of little things you have to pay attention to, little details. So that is basically where I'm going to end it, I believe. But there again, the spells are very similar to how you would do it in 5th edition. They've renamed some of the spells, like they use their own names for wizards instead of using the Wizards of the Coast stuff. So like Beshala's Blinding Mirror Image, and some of them work a little differently, so you're going to have to get used to their different spells. But I guess I get 2 cantrips, and then I get like 4 spells total to put in my spell book, basically. So I'd go to 0 level, and then you would pick the source, would be, in this case, would be a bard. And you could go through these. So I might take the Corin's Taunting Vicious Mockery. So instead of Tasha's, they use their own. And then the other would probably be Prestidigitation. So those would be like my first spells that I get for my first level. And then go to the first level here and then pick whatever you wanted to do. So you got Animal Friendship might be one, just so he can get his stubborn mule to work. Fairy Fire is another. Let's go with Sleep. That's always a nice one. And let's do Cure Wounds. That's always helpful. So a lot of his spells are more utility, not so much damaging, but they do help along with the adventure. So you probably need some allies. But nonetheless, I mean, these are just some of the things that you go through when you're building your character. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of insight on what you're getting. But in the library, Under modules, I have the Menagerie also. And then this is I was covering mostly the Level Up Adventure 5e guide. But if you look through these, you have a reference manual, and you can read these through just like you would your book, and it would explain how this works. And when you go into the character builder in here, it's a lot more detailed, and it even gets into your equipment and such. So like a bard, if you click on that and you look down the list here, it'll talk about more in depth of what all those abilities and features are. And then your tables are built in here as well, just like we were looking at earlier. This is the art specialty, so that's all spelled out. How Bardic Inspiration works, a battle hymn. So this is a lot of custom content that you're going to have to get used to. It looks like some of these level up, some of these change or add to as you go forward in your career as a bard. And then there's all kinds of art and really cool stuff. So it's just up to you how you build your character and how it's going to play out. But I would do a little bit of reading and research beforehand, because I can see towards the end I was starting to get a little choked up because I wasn't sure which direction I should go, because this is like only the second time I've built a character using this rule set. I mean, I have the gist of most of it, but obviously there's a lot of things in here that need to be looked at, and if you don't look at those, you might be missing out on features. Like War Scholar, when you replace an attack or use an action to disarm, grapple, overrun, shove, or tumble, you gain an expertise die. Well, what's an expertise die? Well, these are things that you have to get into for the rule set to understand that. So I would go through and read some of this stuff, and then I would have to figure out where I would want to record my expertise die, because I think that changes as you level up, and it also affects your rolls and such. It's almost like the Battle Master, where you have those different types of attacks, and then you also have the Battle Mastery die. So it probably works similarly to that. But basically, that's all I have for this kind of look through. And there's basic character creation. You can either figure it out on your own, like I did, sort of on the website. You can go through the actual guide that's in the book, that's in the reference manual, or if you're already familiar with it, just start building away. There's a lot of different things, so you got to really look at these abilities and see what they say, because they're not just a description. I mean, like the bit and brittle, I just thought that was, assuming without looking at it, it just looks to me like how to control and set up the bit and brittle for navigation, but actually it has something to do with storing and transporting. So that's what I'm saying, and it only is situational. So you can carry supply equal to your proficiency bonus. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean one item or one barrel? So there's a lot of little nuances that you have to work out. But for the most part, that's what we got. I hope you enjoyed that, and hopefully there'll be more content out there for Fantasy Grounds and for other platforms. You take care, everybody. Have